transferring into their assault boats. The first assault wave was already standing by, waiting for the signal to dash inshore.
June the 6th, 1944, D-Day. A coordinated attack on Germany begins. The Allies approach from the west, while the Russians move in from the east. Both armies are heading for Berlin. By now, many of Hitler's generals have had enough. The losses suffered at Stalingrad were too much. One of the generals decides to do something about it. His name is Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg.
The bomb plot was run by a very brave man, a very brave group of men who were prepared to override their oath, who were prepared to sacrifice themselves if need be.
Their plan is to blow up the Führer in a conference room at the Wolf's Lair, Hitler's headquarters on the Eastern Front.
Stauffenberg, who was a very, very brave man, took a bomb in a briefcase. He planted it under the table and was called out by an accomplice. There's a telephone message.
Von Stauffenberg leaves the room. Another officer who needs to move closer to Hitler pushes the briefcase away from him. The shockwave blasts Hitler. It knocks him from his feet and bursts his eardrums.
It takes a couple of months for the eardrums to actually repair themselves, and they do repair themselves naturally, but he would have had impaired hearing for several months.
Hitler survived with not much more than burst eardrums and a few lacerations. This survival was to him the ultimate proof that Providence was looking after him.
Hitler becomes even more delusional. He believes his survival is an act of divine providence, a sign that he will lead Germany to triumph.
Hitler's sense of grandiosity and immortality, his sense of conviction that he was a chosen one, would have been reinforced fundamentally.
Von Stauffenberg is shot that same evening. Hitler orders a show trial of all the people he believes betrayed him. With the Allies and Soviets on their way to Berlin, it's a last roll of the dice from a desperate man.
For Hitler to be able to be aware of the conspiracy against him was now to have someone close by that he could persecute, that he could destroy, that he could win victories over. So even if he was having defeats outside of Germany, he could have his little mini victories inside of Germany.
5,000 people are rounded up and tried in a public court. 200 are condemned to death. The men are guillotined or hanged with piano wire. In the weeks following the bomb blast, surprisingly, Hitler's tremor disappears.
If the tremor was due to a process such as Parkinson's, then you would expect that tremor actually to be made worse by such a stress. The fact that the tremor went off it probably would give more credence to the people who said that he was just suffering from some kind of anxiety syndrome which was causing his tremor, not actually any disease process in the brain.
Following the assassination attempt, a Dr. Giesing is brought in to examine Hitler. But Giesing isn't too worried about the blast injuries. His main concern is the damage caused to Hitler by years of Morell's remedies. He says that Morell converted a healthy Hitler into one constantly plied with injections and fed with tablets which made Hitler dependent on him.
These remarkable Russian pictures are the latest received from the Eastern Front. They show the triumphant Red Army on the flood tide of victory after victory.
With Germany's defeat becoming inevitable, Hitler's health deteriorates rapidly. He experiences stabbing pains in his right eye. Dr. Morell calls in an expert who diagnoses a vitreous hemorrhage.
Vitreous hemorrhage occurs when blood seeps into the eyeball, so at the back of the eye, and that'll cause problems with vision. So someone might experience what we call floaters, which are where they see little areas, almost floating areas of deficiency in their vision, and then the vision will become quite blurred.
Hitler is also receiving eye drops for his failing eyesight. The eye drops contain cocaine. The cocaine doses are increased to help clear the Führer's head.
The actions of cocaine are very similar to the actions of amphetamine. It makes you feel euphoric, increases your confidence, makes you feel energetic. That's why people like to use it.
In January 1945, with his enemies closing in, Hitler moves into a bunker in Berlin. With him are chiefs of staff, officers, secretaries and doctors. He also takes Eva Braun, a photographer's assistant he'd been seeing since 1929. But in the bunker, the Führer's deterioration continues. He drags his left leg as he walks and develops a stoop. The tremor in his hands is so bad he has to use a rubber stamp to sign his name. People who visit the Führer say that he looks like an old man.
Not only did he have the physical symptoms that you know of his tremor, his heart, all these problems, but he was under huge amounts of stress. Now that will often, if you see somebody who's under a great deal of stress, will actually affect the way they carry themselves. So they may well look crumpled or look like a lesser person.
The fact that Hitler's body deteriorated as quickly as it did cannot simply be reduced to the physical illnesses that he was suffering from, be it Parkinsonism, be it the chronic amphetamine abuse, be it even potentially the question of neurosyphilis that people debate. It would have been that as Germany was disintegrating, Hitler's ability to keep himself glued together was going to pieces.
In the closing months of the war, Hitler issues the Nero Command. It orders that the entire infrastructure of Germany be destroyed.
Toward the end, he was ordering all the canals blocked, the bridges destroyed, the land razed.
He wanted to destroy Germany. He felt that Germany did not deserve to survive after him. And for him to be truly immortal, both he and Germany, he and his body, would need to go ahead and go down in flames at the same time.
As Soviet troops enter Berlin, a desperate Hitler orders twice daily military conferences with his remaining generals. If they fail to attend, they'll be shot. The 20th of April 1945 is Adolf Hitler's 56th birthday. With the Soviets moving in from the outskirts of Berlin, Hitler is urged to flee. But he refuses to leave the city. Everything he believes in is on the brink of collapse.
He lived for a while on the fantasy armies of the SS that were going to come down and rescue him, and he had all these phantom armies that he thought were there, that he created on paper, and if he created them on paper, where were they? Why didn't they come and rescue Berlin? Finally, even he could see that this wasn't going to happen.
Hitler dismisses Morell and tells him his drugs can no longer help him. By now, Hitler feels that everybody is betraying him, none more so than Germany itself. This is the last photograph taken of Hitler. Shortly afterwards, he returns back into the bunker. He'll never be seen alive again. With the war coming to an end, Hitler receives news that his Italian friend and ally, Mussolini, and his mistress have been captured. Their bodies have been kicked and spat at and hanged upside down in a public square. Hitler fears the Soviets will do the same to him and his mistress. He asks Eva Braun to marry him.
Could only end up, finally, by finding some sort of peace, by stopping, deciding to make Eva Braun an honest woman, marry her as he'd promised her.
She was the one person who had remained loyal to him. By this time, Goering and Himmler, even Albert Speer, had all deserted him as he saw it, but Eva Braun did not.
But the marriage is destined to be a short one. He intends to kill himself and Eva the following day. Hitler plans to use cyanide capsules, but fears that his men have tampered with them and will hand him over to the Soviets. So he has his favorite dog, Blondie, force-fed a capsule.
He tested cyanide capsules on his dog to make sure that they would do the job.
The dog dies almost instantly.
The Nazis were very familiar with the effects of cyanide because they used it in the Zyklon B gas that they used to poison their victims in the concentration camps, particularly in Auschwitz, where a lot of it was used.
With the faithful Eva Braun beside him, Hitler retires to his quarters. She swallows her cyanide capsule. Her death is probably instant.
Cyanide is a poison that works extremely fast, and it affects the cells in the body and reduces their ability to use oxygen to create energy. So basically the cells pack up, they can't function anymore.
Some historians say Hitler bit on a cyanide capsule before he shot himself. If so, the cyanide would immediately flood into his system. His heart and lungs would slow down and eventually stop working. He places a pistol to his head and pulls the trigger. The bullet smashes through his skull and extinguishes the life of Adolf Hitler. Hitler didn't want to suffer the same fate as Mussolini. The staff set fire to Hitler's body in the Reich Chancellery Garden.
Hitler's wish to have his body burned is part of his quest for immortality again. If his body was going to be humiliated subsequently, that might somehow affect that quest for immortality.
First thing to burn will be the skin and flesh, and then the muscles, and then the organs in the body cavities. Now, they take a little longer because they're protected by the skeleton. The next thing to burn is the skeleton itself, and then finally the skull and the teeth.
When the Soviets enter the Reich Chancellery Garden, all that remains of Hitler are some bones, a couple of pieces of skull, and the rare dental bridges. But it doesn't end there. The Soviet troops need Hitler's body as a trophy. On the 4th of May 1945, this corpse is presented to the world as the body of the dead dictator. But it's denounced as a fake. An observer notices the corpse is wearing darned socks. The Führer would never have worn darned socks. Hitler's body had in reality been reduced to ashes alongside his wife's in the Reich Chancellery Garden. Adolf Hitler was 56 years old when he killed himself. If he had fled Berlin, then he may have lived only a couple more years before his body gave out on him. It's easy to forget that Hitler was human. One of his legacies must be to remind us of the human capacity for terror and devastation. On the Eastern Front.
Stauffenberg, who was a very, very brave man, he took a bomb in a briefcase. He planted it under the table and was called out by an accomplice. There's a telephone message.
Von Stauffenberg leaves the room. Both armies are heading for Berlin. By now, many of Hitler's generals have had enough. The losses suffered at Stalingrad were too much. One of the generals decides to do something about it. His name is Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg. Another officer who needs to move closer to Hitler pushes the briefcase away from him. The shockwave blasts Hitler. It knocks him from his feet and bursts his eardrums. Stauffenberg.
The bomb plot was run by a very brave man, very brave group of men who were prepared to override their oath, who are prepared to sacrifice themselves if need be.
Their plan is to blow up the Führer in a conference room at the Wolf's Lair, Hitler's headquarters.
Transferring into their assault boats. The first assault wave was already standing by, waiting for the signal to dash inshore.
June the 6th, 1944, D-Day. A coordinated attack on Germany begins. The Allies approach from the west, while the Russians move in from the east.